Privet Katila Wanning Ruski Desu. So it's been a while. It's been a 2 3 year long hiatus. This is my first video coming back, and it's on probably the weirdest topic in the universe, probably the most out of pocket thing ever. Not what usually did, but so basically for the past year I've been autistically following the Russo-Ukrainian War, and I wanted to get back into my video flow by doing a video on that topic, basically something that I've been following and kind of give my own opinions on it. Um, and so the topic of this video, I think, is gonna be pretty interesting because I don't think it's been done as much as because everyone's been focusing. So if you've been following the Russo-Ukrainian War, for example, for the past 4 or 5 months, 6 months maybe, the focus has been on Bakhmut. The Russian advances to take the villages around it, to surround it, and then the battles within it. And that's basically been the main thrust of the focus. Everyone's been focusing on like which mud hut has been taken, which shithole outhouse allows them to gain fire control over like the T 69 highway or whatever. And so that's been basically like which alleyway has been taken, which dumpster allows them to gain like operational tactical fire, pee pee poo poo. So the whole thing is that's basically been the focus of Bakhmut. And but now what this video is about, what I wanted it to be about, is where will the focus of the war be for the next few months after Bakhmut falls? And I wanted to kind of give you guys an outlook on my opinion on where this will be headed. So there is three cities that you need, or three towns more like it, that you need to focus on: Chasov Yar, Ray Alexandrovka, and Seversk. These are the places you'll need to focus on, and maybe also Liman. Now, before we start, we need to look at it from a strategic outlook. What are the Russians trying to do? The Russians' goal at the moment is to secure Donbass, this place in the blue, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, and basically secure them in their full administrative borders. To do that, after the fall of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk back in summer, the Russians have been advancing this way. The Ukrainians set up what I call the Bakhmut-Seversk defense line, and it actually held up pretty well. They've been fighting here for almost a year now. It's been maybe 10 months, 9 months since the battle, and the Ukrainians managed to basically prevent the Russians from breaking through up until basically the last month or two. And so, but now that Bakhmut's taken, this whole defense line is breaking. Now, why do they want to break through this? Why do the Russians want to break through this defense line? To get to the mother of all defense lines, which is the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk-Konstantinovka defense line. I cannot say how important, how important this defense line is to the Ukrainians. This is one of the best defense lines they have. It has a river, and it's basically just this giant urban conglomeration where it's just complete urban. They cannot it's not like there's like an empty spot here. They'll have to go past some urban area to get around it. There's not some empty field they could cross and get around it like they did in Bakhmut. It's just a continuous, urban line. Some less urban than others, but basically a giant urban line with a river, and it's a very hard defense line. If the Russians somehow pass this, if the Russians take this, it is over. They basically have Donbass in their laps at that point. So we have to basically focus on what the Russians will be, so that's the Russians basically are trying to capture Donbass. To do that, they need to pass, basically they need to capture this line. And so to get there, though, they have to pass this line. And so they've done that. So this leads us to where they're going to focus on next. A lot of people have been focusing on Chasov Yar. And I don't think so. For two reasons. One is because of a height difference. If you look at this topographical map of Donbass, or at least this focus of Donbass, you can see Bakhmut, it's in Russian, but it's right here. It's on the low ground. And then Chasov Yar here is on the high ground. And it's about like almost a 200-meter difference. You can't, when the Russians take Bakhmut, they'll be right here. And it'll be very hard for them to advance up into the high ground. It'll be very hard to do that. But beyond just the topographical map, the reason why that's important is because when you're doing battles, you're trying to secure yourself the best battlefield conditions so that you could go on the offensive or defensive the best. You don't just take a village and that's it. You have to secure a certain position that allows you to hold that area and to be able to attack from that area. That's why you know you don't just advance one village at, because it's very hard. It's very easy for them to counterattack and take it back. But yeah, so for tactical reasons, things like the topographical thing has to be taken into account when you look into what battles they'll go to next. But second is this giant salient. The Russians advanced from the Lysychansk area this way. They've broken through Bakhmut, but they still have not advanced at all at Severus. So they basically have this long exposed flank, basically having tens of thousands of soldiers held up here, maybe thousands, just to hold this area to protect their flanks as they're moving this way towards Bakhmut. And so this, the whole purpose of Russia withdrawing from Kherson and other places is because they've been specifically trying to focus on trying to regain they're outnumbered, and they're trying to shorten the front line so that their firepower advantage in air power and artillery power and all of the weapon systems can be fully utilized to the best advantages as they can. So with that being said, where is the fight going to take? So if it's not going to be Chasiv Yar, where are they going? The main battle is going to be along this highway. What the Russians are going to do after Bakhmut falls, they're going to be first, I believe, they're going to advance this way. They're going to advance on this canal. Why? Because once you get on this canal, as we see on the topographical map, you'll actually be on the same elevation as Chasiv Yar for the most part. This basically gives you an even focus on the Ukrainians on Chasiv Yar. If you just focus here, the Ukrainians will be looking down at you. They'll have artillery. Even though if they're outnumbered, they'll be able to withstand assaults. They'll be able to rain down hell on the Russians. So if they get this gives the Russians good defense lines, because then when the Ukrainians are pushed back here, they're on more lower ground, and they'll have to attack the high ground. The same reason why the Russians attacked and took the positions down here in the south, the Arkadrumovka. Also, I forgot to say this. I am extremely sorry for any mispronunciations. I cannot pronounce anything for shit. I'm gonna butcher it like no tomorrow, and I do not mean that. I don't mean that to be offensive. I'm just doing this because I cannot pronounce anything in a foreign language. I am horrible at that. So apologies in advance. Anyway, so what's going to happen is the Russians are going to advance north and basically have Chasiv Yar from the north and the south and the front. But they're not going to attack Chasiv Yar just yet. They're just doing this, again, as I mentioned, to secure a defense perimeter here, to protect their flank here. And they're going to move north. The biggest battles we're going to see is along this highway and along this road here. There's going to be the Russians are going to try to advance fully here and take these 3 villages here. And once these villages are taken and these villages are being fought over, the Russians will basically secure themselves along this Donbass Canal, because then it's just it's a lower it gets lower and lower as they get to Kramatorsk, for example, in Slavyansk. So they'll secure defense positions here, and they'll be very good in doing so. But after that happens, once they get to this area, the main battle is going to be for Ray Alexandrovka. This is where the bloody battle is going to be. We're going to be hearing a lot about this throughout the summer. Now, why are they advancing here? Isn't this extending their front line more? Well, let me show you what they're doing. Let's say they take Ray Alexandrovka as their goal. They're going to move up and go to the Sovietsky Donetsk River. Take these 2 little villages, won't matter. They'll get there, and oh, would you look at that? There is a giant Seversk pocket. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians cut, in a pocket, liquidated. And there'll be some attacks here, but those are going to be mostly for pin-down operations, to hold down the Ukrainians before they could advance, so they can't just continue reinforcing Ray Alexandrovka, for example. So that's, as you can see, they're going to be focused. They're going to go up here, secure the canal to get defense line, go up here, and basically make a pocket. And basically, once Ray Alexandrovka falls, the idea is they could either capture all of them in a pocket and basically have them have no supplies coming in. It's not even like, like a lot of people say, it's a tactical pee-pee-poo-poo encirclement. No, we're talking a full-on cauldron. Nothing's coming in, no food, no ammo, no supplies. They are fucked. And so they'll either completely surrender after a few, very shortly, or they will force themselves to leave so they can't get encircled. And basically Russia will be able to walk in here and just take this area here without a fight, almost, for the most part. And basically, and at the same time, I am predicting there'll be advances from Kremenai to Liman. Why? Well, because actually, it's not a total cauldron yet, because they could cross the river and try to use the Liman to get back to Slavyansk. If they advance here, the Russians will be able to advance, to take Liman, take these villages here, and then there'll be a proper cauldron. So at the same time as there's fighting up here, the Russians will be advancing from Kremenaya down here, meeting up in this area. So we're going to see a ton of bloody battles in this area for the next few weeks, maybe even months. Basically, I don't think there's even going to be a battle for Seversk per se. The Russians aren't going to try to advance, try to take it. It'll be emptied for the most part by the time, because most of the battle will be in Ray Alexandrovka. Now, they might advance north too, because this is a very good defense line to have at the Osko River. The reason why they weren't able to hold it before is because the same reason why the Ukrainians were able to defeat the Russians in Kharkov back in September is, well, because the Russians didn't show up. But with Russian mobilization, they'll be able to properly actually man this. And they won't actually have to man it as much, because this is a very thick river, and they'll be able to defend it a lot less than they need. They actually don't need to put as much troops as they have right now, because right now this line is just land, and they need a bunch of soldiers here to make sure the Ukrainians can't just bypass them like they did here. But once they take this, they won't have as much, and it will allow them to get behind Slavyansk, because once they reach this area here, which is behind the Osko River, they'll be able to attack Slavyansk from behind. Because, as I mentioned before, they're trying to get here. And as we saw how hard it was to take Bakhmut, right? Let me tell you, I don't think the Russians have it in them to be able to just try to, just raw push through this. Impossible. Well, not impossible, but it'll take a lot of effort and hardship, and I think the Russians are trying to be clever about it. They're gonna try to advance from Avdiivka up here, try to get to behind this line, because as mentioned, if they could get behind it, they could collapse it. And yeah, so that's what the focus will be. Try to get behind Slavyansk, just get behind them, cut off the supply lines, and but that'll be the focus. But they have to actually get in front of it first. So the battles for the next few months during the summer will be here mostly. And also for Chasiv Yar, now it depends on how much the Russians can focus. Do the Russians have enough troops where they only could attack on one direction? Will they be putting all their effort here? If they only could do one effort at a time, this will be where they focus. But they might do two. Bakhmut is a city of 80,000 people. It's a big strategic hub. It took a lot of effort to take it. Chasiv Yar and Ray Alexandrovka are more villages. Chasiv Yar is a city of 8,000 compared to Bakhmut of 80,000. Ray Alexandrovka is a city of 3,000, I believe. These aren't going to be as hard to take. So they might be able to do, walk and chew bubblegum, or chew bubblegum and walk, or whatever the fuck. But anyway, but in terms of Chasiv Yar, they're going to have it in the front, the top, the north, and the south, and they'll be able to basically put the squeeze on it like they've been doing in Bakhmut. So that'll be what the focus will be. And Chasiv Yar should fall probably easier than Bakhmut, but it really depends. We'll have to see how that goes. But basically, that'll be where the focus of how I predict the next future battles will be. I think there'll be battles in Avdiivka. Yeah, I believe there's going to be some, there's probably going to be some more battles here, some skirmishes in Marnika. But the main effort, where we're going to see Russian offensives, will be in the places I mentioned. There'll be some back and forth, some positional fighting in other areas, and then that's not even including the Zaporozhye Ukrainian counterattack, which has been in the works for a few months now as well. But in terms of where Russia will advance, it will be there in this area here, to basically the main purpose to get to this line. So yeah, that's basically the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. So aim high, wander on, from America with Russian love.